I'm looking forward to it.
In Boston area, Northeast, and beyond.
My card is in the front and has my cell number on it. Just text me.
She'll want here until like probably
Looking forward to it.
4 or 5 more weeks, I guess.
Okay.
That's
She's
what
just
young
from the
boys
courses,
are for.
in Kansas. She has at-risk.
One of my earliest memories of being a hero was going and getting a cat. It wasn't my cat either.
She really needs to go up to.
No, this wasn't a happy cat. A cat that goes that high up in the tree is not a happy cat.
That was
By definition, almost always.
the one thing
So
I
I had
regretted
excess
when
egg.
I was
If you would, I didn't bring them with me because we're sitting up the car that long, but I can
other options.
swing them by
But
and
I-
eat some meals or whatever some other time.
Yeah, oh yeah, what a great spot.
Yeah, everybody's producing and
Council,
so much
council. Hello.
Test, test.
Test, test.
Let me turn
me
off.
up.
Test. Do what?
Council, your mics are hot, just FYI.
Yeah. I'm sure she. Here she is.
Okay, well, I just thought about that. I'm like, is this like not our normal?
Kind of. Yeah, I know. I thought it was actually 6. I'm glad they sent an email. Okay, I got a little bit confused. Kind of weird to have
Testing, testing.
Fisher, McKee, and McDuffie are from the same.
Testing, testing.
We may be accused of.
Testing, testing. That's better.
I have a Blair.
Do what?
I have a Blair in my back.
You have a Blair.
Yeah, so that's also Scottish.
Yeah. No, but I think McKee is part of the McAfee clan, which is
The City of Rollingwood Comprehensive Plan Workshop number 1 will come to order Wednesday, February 16th at 5:01. Thank you all for being here. We will start with roll call. Councilwoman?
Brooke Brown.
Alec Robinson.
Roxanne McKee.
Bill McDuffie.
Sarah Hudson?
And Gavin Massengill. Got that. And with that, we will move on to public comments. Are there any citizens here wishing or have questions and wish to address the town hall with regard to the following matters that will be received in the conclusion of each presentation? Do we have anybody?
I don't believe anyone signed up. We'll take them on each item as they go through and,
Sounds good.
okay.
Let's start off with the presentations. Presentation and discussion with Tom Farrell as Chair of the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force regarding the following portions of the Comprehensive Plan as recommended by the City Council by the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force. And that's the facilities and infrastructure is where we'll start off. And then we'll move to economic development and fiscal policy and plan implementation. And I will recognize our esteemed colleague, former mayor, Mr. Farrell. If you would just introduce yourself and kick us off.
Tom Farrell, 3223 Park Hills Drive, and thank y'all for doing this. And want to thank all of y'all for y'all's service to our city. And if y'all do a really good job, we're going to double y'all's salary that y'all currently get for next year on that. So, but we do appreciate everything that y'all do, and I know it's hard and time consuming, and we appreciate y'all's time and talent that y'all provide for all of our citizens on that. The comprehensive plan and the pages we're taking on today are 30. We'll start on 31, which is our facilities and infrastructure plan. The comprehensive plan task force decided that we would not comment directly, or we would accept the 2020 or 2019 facilities plan, a master plan, which was already done by the city. So we kind of followed that as we went along through our procedures that we went through. A couple of points that I'll make on that, and I think y'all all have this in front of you. Stop me if you have a question at any time, and I'll try to break that down for you as to what our thoughts were on that. We based a lot of this on our surveys that we got, the citizen survey primarily, but we also had a survey done by Pegasus that we also looked at, as well as a number of other surveys and not surveys, but studies that were done, and you have a list of those in the back of the comprehensive plan that we've given you. I think that it was telling on the infrastructure and facilities plan. A couple of things that we got out of that is that our residents expressed their greatest concern for stormwater drainage issues. They also were very concerned about our water line breaks. I know none of this is new to any of y'all, but this is what we got out of that. Weak cell phone service, which I'm not sure what we're going to do about that, but that is there. That was a concern. And then we had the other items, which were the park ranked very high, and the City Hall was also a concern, although it had a various amount of support for various different things that the city could do to remedy City Hall on that. So as we go through each little section on this, I'll pause and just ask if anybody has a question, and we can kind of go from there, and just let me know, and we'll do that so y'all can see what we do. The drainage was interesting in that the wording that was used primarily on that was drainage for health and safety issues. Edge Grove Drive ranked very high on that. BK's Road ranked very high on that. And then again, there was a concern of our drainage was caused by larger homes. Our drainage issues, new issues was caused by larger homes on that. And that's also something that came out of there. I think that we can kind of go through some of the other of this, and I'll stop if we do that. Roads, there were concerns about the ongoing maintenance of our roads as we went through, that we got a lot out of that, and there is a implementation section which we'll get to later as to what we would recommend that would be some causes that the city could do to help remedy all of these issues on that. But for right now, I'm just going to go through what we looked at and the feedback we got from our citizens on that. Water and wastewater. There were a number of issues on that. We did not have a current wastewater study as such on that. We did get some input from the engineers as to our existing capacity on our wastewater system, because that had been a concern from several of our citizens on that. To kind of put that in a little bit in a capsule on that, we ended up, when we put in the wastewater system, had an estimated 1,100 LUEs of service. An LUE of service is the equivalent of one residential house, how much they would use on that. So we could handle 1,100 houses. That included the commercial that we had on there. There are a number of issues with the wastewater that we have on that. We have several of our properties on the south side of BK's Road that do not connect directly to our system. They are fed into the City of Austin system, and we have to account for those as we go through our account per our contract with the City of Austin on that. We have one resident that's on Rollingwood Drive that's actually hooked up to the city of Westlake Hills wastewater system on that, just one. I'm not sure, I wasn't able to find an interlocal how they're being billed or how they're, or how that's, what agreement we have, but it is done. So that they are hooked up on that. We have several of our commercial properties on the north side of BK's Road, generally running from the Dry Creek to Rollingwood Drive, that are still on septic on that. And they did not get put on sewer because at that time, if y'all remember the road there is very, very difficult to put a sewer line in with the right-of-way that we had because there's a cliff there on BK's Road. And so we were waiting pending the completion of BK's Road improvements before that happened on that. That's been 20 years. We hadn't got that done yet, but hopefully that will get done sometime in the future on that. One recommendation that you'll see later on is we recommend that the existing capacity we have in our wastewater system should be allocated to those businesses first, since they've been paying taxes, they're existing businesses, before we allow any other type of development to use that wastewater capacity on it. I'll note one other thing on the wastewater. When the wastewater system was put in, there was after it was designed and bid and let and all that, we were in construction, we had two major projects that approached us to join our wastewater system. One was our shopping center across from on BK's Road and all the adjacent office buildings that goes with that. The other is Rollingwood Town Center, and those used quite a bit of LUEs. It was calculated in this remaining amount that we have. Currently, we use roughly 600 LUEs is the estimate that we have right now on that. That does not take into account the amount that we have tied in with the City of Austin service that comes directly from the City of Austin on that. When these two projects, Mira Vista and Rollingwood Town Center, came online, one of the requirements we had for them is at their cost, they put in a 100,000 gallon excess tank that we have located off of Delano Lane. And that was for storage, excess storage capacity in case we had a peak flow issue that came through on that. Any questions on wastewater?
One question, you said the south side of BK Road, is it just the little house, those residential houses, or the whole south side of BK Road is?
No, only a portion of the south side, and that would run from Center 1, Center 2, Center 3, and the hospital. And then there's an office building just to the east of the hospital, and I'm not sure what the name of that is now. But they're all hooked directly to the City of Austin. And then I think there is George Nall's little heritage homes that are located off of Montebello are hooked directly to the City of Austin on that. Now, our contract does require us to account for those in our usage that we do with the City of Austin on that. So. It's wastewater. It's an underground tank, and it was done at the time. There were going to be a number of restaurants potentially on there. We weren't sure what it was going to be, and so when you get a peak flow that comes in with everything else, there was a concern that it could overload our lift station down on Delano Lane, and so we have a ability to utilize that excess holding tank on that. So one thing I'll point out on the infrastructure plan that I thought was very notable that showed up quite a bit is a a vast majority of our residents had no knowledge or information at all about our master infrastructure plan on that. And this may be something that the city council may want to take a step back and revisit that to try to get our residents a little more up to speed on what they were looking at on that. So I think that's where, that's an opportunity, I think, for the city to step in on that. On the 2019 facilities master plan on that. We ended up with about 225 responses on our survey, and the vast majority of them did not have any real knowledge of that plan. Most of them didn't know it existed. So I think that's important. That's something for an opportunity for the city to kind of revisit that on an educational basis to make everybody a little bit more aware of it. Because I think we've paid for it. We might as well look at that. One other issue I'll go on page 32. The residents were very split on what we should do with City Hall on that. And I think y'all have a pie chart there. I can read the numbers. I'm not a numbers. When somebody reads me numbers, I usually gloss over. So, but I'll be glad to read them for you if you'd like. But about 35% indicated support for either completely rebuilding or completely renovating the existing building, and a little more than 22% supported renovating portions of the existing building, and a significant amount, but a minority, 28% indicated just leave it like it is on that. Now, when we got down to some of the other details on that, I think there was some, there was issues that I think people recognized about City Hall that needed to be corrected on that. Again, I think this is a good opportunity for the city council and the city to kind of educate our citizens on what needs we have on that. I know we have a needs study done, and it may be time to update and kind of revisit that issue, because I'm sure this will be if it goes to a bond issue, you need to have informed citizens before you get to that point on that. So to me, that's something that I think is an opportunity for the city to be able to get communicate better with our citizens about what our needs are as we get out on that. So our water capacity, we do have a recommendation that we put in there. I'll get to our full recommendations in a moment. But our water capacity, we have sufficient. I think in 2000, we did a contract with the City of Austin to provide us water. That contract, and that was an open-ended contract. And in 2004, the City of Austin and City of Rollingwood modified that agreement to where we have some provisions that once we reach 75% of our water capacity, then we have to go find a alternate set of sources of water. We can buy it from LCRA, we can do that. They'll treat it, but we have to have the water capacity there. Right now, I think we calculated we were at 62.5% of our water usage on that. So
But
that's,
they would still sell us the 750,000 gallons, or
Well-
would they just cut us off and say,
I'd have to go back out and look at the contract per se, but I think that we are required to do that. And I guess if we violate the contract, I guess it's awfully difficult to think that we'd be cut off. There's
Well,
too many there's governmental agencies that would step in and take care of that, but we would still be out of compliance with our contract.
right? I just meant if we needed to supplement what we would continue to be able to buy some water from Austin, we just have to supplement it with a new source.
That is correct. I
Okay.
think you're exactly correct. What it means is that the city of Austin purchased water rights years ago from LCRA. They spent $100 million to buy these water rights. And what they're saying is, once we get to 75%, we have to go buy the water rights. They will still process the 750,000 gallons to us, but we have to have an alternative. And it could be groundwater for that matter, or we could wheel the water through some other entity on there that's not tied into the city. But we have to have that ability to, they just didn't want to give us all their water rights, is I think the bottom line on that. So, but we did agree to that in 2004, and that modification went into effect. There also, we had, I think, a 30-year contract with a 30-year extension in 2000, and I think that was shortened in 2004 on that. So,
Hey, Tom, so since this is a work session, let's get a few things out. Do you happen to know, and Ashley, I'm sort of talking to you too, do you know where that contract might be? I have not seen it as the new mayor in town.
I do not have a copy of that contract.
Okay. The one he's talking about?
Yeah, I think it's an addendum that we have.
It's attached to the case and freeze report in our packet.
Okay.
Yeah,
But that's the one you're referencing with the addendum that you just referenced.
Both of them are in there.
yeah,
Actually, yeah, that's water.
yeah.
Not the original, but it has the addendum
Both,
with it.
it's got the original and the amendment.
It's got
Okay.
both of them
All right.
on there.
Great.
I don't have a copy of it, I don't have the copy of it,
Yeah, the original.
Mayor. I hope not.
Okay. Keep trucking. Thank you.
There we go. The facilities and infrastructure recommendations for drainage, and I'm just gonna read these because I think this is the crux of what we did. The strike force strongly supports implementing stormwater drainage improvements that address the most significant risks to the health and safety of Rollingwood residents. The strike force also emphasizes that drainage improvements were identified as the highest community need by residents. Because the strike force was asked not to assess the 2020 infrastructure improvement plan, it takes no other position on the drainage issues on that. That's our first recommendation on that. City Hall, the strike force has received input from city administrators and the chief of police on the need for more space and improvements to city administrative and police facilities. City and police employees indicate that there is no more space to add additional employees, that there are no showers or private bathroom for employees, and no private rooms to interview crime victims or suspects. However, the strike force did not take a position on which option should be selected for contemplated city hall improvements. We anticipated that, frankly, on this, we anticipated that we would go back and revisit the need study that we had, and that's a decision I think the city council needs to make as we go forward on that. I think it was clear from what I just read that the task force as a whole felt that there were needs for improvements to City Hall. How we go about doing that, how you pay for it, Gavin, is y'all's bailiwick on that. So, but I would urge, again, a significant educational process on that to our citizens about why we're needing to do that, because there was a lack of, and some of the people I talked to did not have a good feel for the necessary improvements that I think should be required here on that. So, and I think that could be solved too by educational deal to our citizens. How we go about doing that, again, I think that's the city council's purview to try to figure out how to go about doing that. Y'all are very capable of being able to do it, I think. Water infrastructure, the strike force notes that many Rollingwood residents express the need to address frequent water line breaks and boil water notices. This was before, of course, we wrote this before this past latest boil water notice. The strike force did not receive testimony or engineering reports on our water lines and therefore defers to the city council as to the best way to manage the city's water infrastructure. And again, we referred to the facilities report that was done on that. So, from just a side note on that, just, you know, anytime that we start on a water line and complete a project, we have to start on another one, because this is a continuing deal. They all have a finite life. We all think we're on rock. Unfortunately, these rocks move and brush up against pipes. So I think we started the water line in the 1990s, big line improvements, and we've gone through several sections, but I think there's still some that need to be done on that, as y'all are all aware of that. Any questions on any of that? Good. And if something comes up after, just let me know. I'd be glad to kind of tell you where our position was on that. Okay, the next item we had was economic development and fiscal policy, and that is on page 39 of our actually, did we, before I go, I'll leave that since I asked you to find it. The wastewater line map is in there. I forgot about that. Yeah, and Alex, let me, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna step over here and kind of identify these properties that we were talking about, so
sure,
that
that'd be
it's
great.
easier to do. Our wastewater line stops right here. Mark over here. And these properties right here, these commercial properties, are not on sewers. They're on they're on septic.
For those who can't see the map, Tom was pointing to the east boundary of the Palisades tract on the north side of Big Caves Road.
I forgot where it was. This property, this property, this property, this property, this property, these and these are located, are serviced by the city of Austin. All of these properties are located on our system, are serviced by Rolling, and go into our flow. And I believe this is the one property that we have that is located, that is serviced by the city of Westlake Hills.
Oh, that residential house?
Yeah.
The residential house there?
Yeah.
It's a residential house that's actually zoned commercial,
Okay,
but
okay, I gotcha.
it's zoned,
It's zone commercial?
it is zoned commercial. I don't have I couldn't find the interlocal we have with Westlake Hills. And I don't think, actually, did y'all didn't find that, did you?
I'm not sure. I don't think we did.
Yeah. It may have been, I'm not sure how it was done, but the topography was such that we would have had to put either a very strong pump there, or we'd have to put additional lift station, and so that's why that worked that way. So these are the properties that I think in our recommendations that you'll see later on that we recommended that they've been paying taxes, they've been residents, been commercial residents of Rollingwood for a long time, and as we go through our capacity issues on wastewater, I think they should probably get the first option on some of that.
I see.
So we have sufficient wastewater if it's monitored correctly on that. This is, you know, the numbers will not add up if I tell you we have 600 active LUEs being used and there's 1,100 that we built this for. but there's a peak flow item that goes into that calculation that you wanna have a little bit in excess. That did not take into account our 100,000 gallon tank that we could use to do that. Our contract with Austin, I'm retrograding a little bit, but our contract with Austin on the wastewater is based on a
Peak.
per gallons flow that we can submit to them. It doesn't say how much, it just says we can only submit so much per hour, minute. I'd have to go back and look at that, I don't remember. But it's because the pipe size that we pump to has a finite capacity, and that's all we can pump in there.
So Tom, that 100,000 gallon tank is always connected and it's just kind of managing flow rate out of it, or it's there, but we haven't
Phil, I don't,
accessed it
that
yet?
tank may have been used once.
Okay.
I don't think it's been used very often. It may have been used more than I think. I personally have not been down in it to measure it and don't intend to. I'm made it a point to be of sufficient size that you don't fit into one of those manholes that do that. Some of you guys.
It's a really big manhole. I know the manhole.
But it could be used in the future to how we store that during the peak flows. And it could be used, I was talking to Brooke earlier, you know, I kicked myself during our freeze a year ago yesterday. You know, if I thought about it, I would have suggested that we pump all our lift stations at that time into that storage capacity, and so we would not have had any kind of issues that came up, or they would have been moderated anyway. And that's still available if we have a problem. Now, I know we're gonna get generators for each of our lift stations, but you know, sometimes things don't work. And, you know, we have that, this is a safety valve on that we had on that.
So everything goes to the lift station at Delana?
Ultimately, that lift station to Delana is the only one we have pumping to the city of Austin,
Okay.
other than those that are connected directly to the city of Austin.
So all of the other lift stations in town pump to Delana?
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Okay, page 39. The key takeaways of our economic development and fiscal policy. And Brooke, I don't know if you want to take some of this, or do you want me to just continue on this?
I think you should do it, and
I'll
then
do it.
I'll go over the bond. I was
Great.
prepared to go over just the bond analysis.
Okay. As all of y'all know, most of our sources of income are property tax revenues that we have, and sales tax revenues add significantly to that, but not as much as we all would like to have on that. But that's part of the purpose of what we did this for, was to try to come up with a master plan that we could maybe change those projections slightly on that. The property taxes, and a little bit of information, I'm sure y'all have all looked at this. We hit $1 billion in valuation in Rollingwood, which is a fairly significant number. And our tax revenues that we got on that from all our properties on that was $2.62 million on that. And we got there are some debt service issues that we have to pay. We have to pay $1.27 million for debt service, and $1.35 million available for our maintenance and operation of our city on that. So that's where we are on those numbers on this. Now, one of the addendums that you'll see in the comprehensive report, we had a resident that went through and tried to use a program to determine where our properties turn from being maybe a $1.5 million valuation to a $5 million valuation, or whatever it would be if they redeveloped that property on that. That's not a very good, you cannot use that for a budgetary basis, but you can certainly use it as a planning tool for the future on that, to project as our city redevelops. You're gonna have some changes in valuations that come on that.
And we'll have changes in the drainage.
And cost.
Infrastructure
And
that's
cost.
required as well.
Yeah. So, but that's something I would encourage you to look at carefully, because I found that to be a very interesting planning tool. And I would think that our bond people might find that extraordinarily interesting too. One of the things I'll point out to you, I'm not sure that we had that in here, but I'll point it out anyway. Gavin, if you haven't been hit on by the bond people, you will, and they'll go, you guys rely too heavily on property taxes. Property valuations, we got young people here, they won't like to hear this. Property valuations don't always go up. They sometimes go down. So, you know, that's something that bond people have questions about, and they've questioned us on it for during my tenure, during I think every mayor's tenure. That's been a question that's come up. I don't know if y'all have had that yet, but you will. That comes up on that. So they actually prefer a very diverse type of income stream that's recession proof. I'm not sure what that is, but you know, but that's what they prefer. So we do anticipate that as property values rise and as redevelopment rise, and this is just the income stream, Sarah, we do get a greater income that comes in off of our property taxes on that. We recognize that. BK's Road, we all recognize that's our only source of commercial activity that we have, with the exception of our sales tax that the city could potentially get off of our residents buying online and using Rollingwood as their address on that. Which, if you haven't had this problem, I have. I keep putting in Rollingwood, and then when I get to the pay section, it's flipped back to Austin. So that happens when you put the zip code in. It wants to give it to Austin. We just remember, we do get, that's not lost to us, because we do get to go to the controller, give them our addresses, and they farm those, they sift those out so that we get that. But it's a pain for staff to do that.
And I did that last year. We did that last year.
Yeah, and that's a wise thing to do, and I'm glad y'all did, because that is something. And how much money did we get, Gavin? Do you recall offhand?
I don't recall offhand. Actually, I think their software actually was catching most of it anyway.
Good, good. Well, that's one of the most important issues that we noticed on all of our survey and conversations we had with citizens and our task force was, above all this, we want to maintain the residential nature of our city on that. And that was singularly the most important thing that I think that came out of most of the discussions we had on that. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. It's always nice to look at cities such as Sunset Valley that have a huge commercial tax base, but Rollingwood we have to take into account all our neighbors and that are impacted by any of this, and that's something that I would encourage the city council to keep maintaining, and I don't have any doubts at all that y'all will. The last thing we did is that we suggested that the city, a recommendation, takeaway, that the city implementing a city financial policy that reflects the values that we've just gone through and factors in the long-term best interests of the city and provide our sound financial planning. I'm not sure that, I think it would be, our financial plan needs to be updated, I won't say every year, but every couple of years, because times change and things are going to be different than what we do on that. So I don't think we've developed that plan yet, and I may be wrong. Actually, we haven't developed that yet.
Not necessarily a financial plan. We do have like investment policies and
Yeah.
supporting plans.
And I think that's kind of the different deal to where we would, the type of deal that I think we're talking about is looking forward and saying, okay, we're getting 70-some-odd% of our revenue from our property owners. We want to try to move that into different categories that we do on that. So, any questions? Okay. There are a couple things, our discussion with the respect to our fiscal policies on that. And Brooke, I'm gonna leave this because this is actually getting into, this is page 40, and it gets into the bond
Okay.
issues on that. I think that Brooke
I can-
worked very hard on this, and I think did an excellent job, and I think that she'd be better at that than I would on that. At the bottom, our policies that we would develop, that we recommend on that, keeping in mind that our citizens want a single family, want to protect our city as a single family residence city primarily on that. These are the points that I'll finish up with. 1, build and maintain a positive and competitive business-friendly climate that will retain, grow, and attract high-quality restaurants and retail businesses in the city's commercial corridor along BK's Road. Easily said. That's something to say. I've always thought Rollingwood was a welcoming city to new businesses and restaurants on that, but that's something that we would recommend that we continue with that. Rather than build multi-story, y'all all like this, multi-story, multifamily housing, continue to invest in the single-family character and quality of life that provide the city with a competitive advantage in terms of economic development and growth in property values. I'm sorry, I'm on page 41. I skipped one section for Brooke. First, look to new revenue made available by increasing the market value of new and existing Rollingwood properties to fund projects rather than raising property taxes. Not surprising, not only here, but in some of our other recommendations we made and comments we received from our citizens. They don't like paying taxes, and you know, it is what it is, but that's all of us, I suspect, on that. So that's it. Explore to the greatest extent possible third-party sources of funds, including state and federal funds, to assist in financing of infrastructure projects. When we did this, they were just going through the Infrastructure Act at Congress. That's one source that I think that I know I feel comfortable that we'll look at, but that doesn't mean we can't look at other sources of state park funds, that sort of thing that comes in on that. I will caution some of the experience we've had in Rollingwood. For instance, the bike lane deal, turns out that our grant, the cost of implementing the requirements of the grant were more than putting in the stripes that we had to put in.
We actually didn't have wide enough.
Yeah, and you couldn't do it.
No, we couldn't do it.
But even then, the cost of widening sidewalks and that sort of thing was just, grants, it sounded good. I'll just caution you on that, and Roxanne, I know you've gone through that, so you know what I'm talking about on that. Number 5, which I think we got a lot of feedback on, is require voter approval for any new debt that comes in the city on that. I know we've used some short-term debt instruments before, and I think that they have a use, but our citizens were very adamant about making sure that we vote on debt instruments on that as we move forward on that. Develop a fiscal policy that balances use of tax funds between annual expenses and long-term project financing. And this will go back to our bond, how we would want to look at our bonds as we go forward on that, as how we do it. And that is page 41, I believe. And Brooke, do you want to do yours now, or you want me to go through the implementation section?
Either way.
I'll let you go
Okay.
forward, 'cause we're going to do both of those.
And, go ahead. I'm gonna pull up 3. And then I'll pull up item number 3 while we're doing this. Presentation and discussion with Brooke Brown, Strike Force member, regarding the Strike Force bond and tax rate analysis.
Thank
Brooke.
you.
Thank you.
I'm appearing here at this moment tonight as a former member of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force. And as part of that work of the task force, we prepared an analysis to give us some idea of what in terms of additional bond funding might be available to the city of Rollingwood. What we've talked about so far is what we want to do in terms of projects. This is the part of the discussion that is more like a root canal or a family budget meeting when we're talking about now what can we afford to do. This is the other half of the decision we have to make. As I see it, there's 2 decisions. What do we want to do? What projects do we want to do and need to do? And the second half of that is what can we afford to do and what sources of revenue can we use to fund those projects. So what this chart does is answer the question in a what might seem somewhat backwards way. Can that be expanded to make it more legible? This way? Yes. There we go. If you look at the numbers in column 5, that would be the annual cost in a city budget to fund a 20-year bond in the amount shown in column 1. So, for example, if we wanted to issue a $10 million bond, That would cost about $670,000 in annual debt service for a 20-year bond. That would mean to a resident having a $1 million valued property, $405 in tax, additional tax. And you can do that for the you can look at the column 5 numbers for the various bond amounts shown in column 1. So in other words, your principal and interest payment is the column 5 number, and the column 1 number is the total amount of principal, the nominal value of the bond. And this was done in conjunction with U.S. Capital Advisors based on the data available to us last summer, which was the 2020 property tax values. Those numbers, those values are going up, and I can talk to you about that a little bit. But for purposes of budget planning and what we might expect the taxpayer impact to be at various bond levels, these numbers, I would say, would be pretty conservative. It's going to be somewhat less than the number shown in column 2. So it's these numbers would be updated for current property values, current residential versus commercial splits in property values, any changes in exemptions and other matters, but they're ballpark on the conservative side, I would say. As a information, probably most people in this room may know it, but not everyone would know. The Rollingwood portion of the tax bill that any resident or commercial property owner receives is about 12% of the total tax bill. So the information shown in column 2 on the chart, column 3 on the chart, would be the increase in the Rollingwood tax with respect to each of those bond amounts in column 1. And the information in column 4 is the impact to a resident's total property tax bill for the same bond amounts that are in column 1. So that's how to read this chart. And it's intended just as a tool to get a ballpark of what the impact would be to a taxpayer in Rollingwood of issuing bonds in the amount shown on this chart. So of course, those bonds are being 20-year bonds. They would require voter approval. For any given project, a bond may be longer than 20 years. 20 years is not a given. It's just a pretty good ballpark for a capital project like a wastewater system or a drainage improvement. And one other thing to say about the use of long-term debt for those kinds of projects is that you are allocating the cost of the project across the useful life of the project, which also means that a customer that's here for the next 5 years and then gone, or a customer that moves in 5 years, are going to pay for that project proportional to their use of it. And that is why it's a tool, a good tool for using for these kind of capital projects that last a long time. You're allocating the cost, the capital cost of the project over the life of the project so that all users of that project pay proportionately. The next page of this handout, and it's available on the website for today's meeting, and is just a couple of other facts to keep in mind as we go through this exercise of deciding what we want to recommend to our city for these kinds of projects. Property tax, as Tom said, is the single largest source of funds. The current property tax revenues are $2 $2,527,000 for the year 2022. That's what's in our budget for property tax receipts. That number is based on the Travis County Property Tax Appraisal District valuation of Rolling Wood property as of January 1, 2021. So we're about a year and a half behind what the current values of those properties are. So, and this is a process that goes on across the state for all entities that have a property tax. That we in Texas have a uniform property tax system. All properties are valued by the county tax appraisal district as of January 1 of a fiscal year. In September, cities set their budget for the next year, so they set their tax rates based on that January 1. In September of 2021, which was the beginning of the new fiscal year, the tax rate was set based on by law, the January 1, 2001 property tax valuation. So we lag behind, and at this point in time, our property valuations haven't caught up with the building that's going on in our community that we see every day. But they are increasing. Of that $2.5 million that we received today in property tax, $1,230,000 goes for the payment of existing bonded indebtedness and the tax notes that were passed in 2019. And then about $1.3 million of the property tax is used to fund city operations. In addition to the property tax, we have sales tax revenues currently estimated for this budget year at $550,000 a year. Those are also going up. If you look at the sales tax summary we get in the agenda packet, we see month over month increases compared to last year, which is probably the result of the change in the size of sales tax due to on internet sales. We also receive revenues from permits, water sales, drainage fees, court fees, and other fees, but those fees are generally, those revenues related to city operations. For example, we get revenues from sales of water, that pays for the water system. Typically, you know, that there's an ongoing operation that generates those funds that has costs. So the same thing with, we now have a drainage fee, we now have court fees, permit fees, those kinds of things that relate to ongoing operations of the city. In terms of the current debt outstanding, Rolling Wood has $14.4 million in principal in long-term debt outstanding. 9.2 of that 14.4 was used for the purchase of the wastewater system from LCRA. $2 million relates to the commercial notes that were sold in 2019, and $3.2 million is from bonds that were issued in 2012 and 2014. We covered what the annual principal and interest payments are. Okay. And then if we go to the third page, what are our other additional sources of revenues that we might look to fund projects? First is the increase in property valuations. From 2018 to September 1 of 2021, there's been a 25% increase in the valuation of Rolling Wood properties. Our properties now, I have the valuation, and it is now $1.152 billion in property value. It was in the 980,000 range in 2018. So that's how much we've grown up to that valuation, which was January 1 of 2021. We don't have the 2022 numbers yet. Commercial property valuations, we'll, at the next town hall, we'll cover that portion of the comprehensive plan that talks about changes in zoning for commercial properties. We are at least there is the hope that those changes in zoning requirements on commercial properties will allow for enhanced development along our commercial corridor. Those enhanced developments will both increase the property tax value and potentially increase sales tax value. But some of those include, while we're not changing the height restrictions currently, we are recommending changes in the setbacks and how those properties might be used that we think will enhance their attractiveness for improved development along the commercial corridor. Sales tax revenues, Tom's covered that, and we're expecting those to continue to increase. We have a 2026 reduction in our current principal and interest payments on long-term debt of $300,000. The 2019 tax notes will be paid at that point, which gives us $300,000. Those were 8-year notes. When they're paid, the principal and interest payments for other debt will drop by $300,000, so that can fund a certain amount of additional capital improvements, more than the $2 million if you're using a 20-year bond instead of an 8-year tax note. And then the other item, alternatively, and probably what a bond advisor would advise, if we were to go, if we were to decide to issue bonds, and got taxpayer approval in the next year or two, a bond advisor would probably advise us to structure that new debt, including the 8-year notes, over a 20-year period. So that would be a refinance. Think of it as if it's a refinance, but it would also be beneficial to us in terms of what that reduction in the principal and interest on those notes would be. And then the last item is third-party grants. We hope that there may be either state or federal infrastructure grant funds that would be available for some of our projects. At the federal level, those details are just beginning to filter out through the various agencies that will implement the funds that were in the January 2022 infrastructure bill. And then also some of those funds will trickle down to the state. The state may also have use of some of those federal funds plus the existing funds that may be available through the Water Development Board and other state agencies. So obviously that's something I think if I put on my council person hat, we need to thoroughly investigate the use of those funds for any of the projects that we have in mind today. So thank you for your attention. I hope that this is a useful tool for both the community to know what the impacts of these projects might be if we were to go fund them through a bond issue, and the council has a useful tool to use to begin to plan what we think the community might accept and what we could afford. Thank you.
Thank you. Brooke, I've got a question for you first. I'm going to pose the question to you. I'm really talking to Abel, and so I'm going to give him time to to think about it. Do you know of that 2026 debt retirement that you're looking at 1.2? Do you know which bond fund that is?
It's shown. I can show you in a U.S. Capital Advisors report. I think I may have it with me, but
2012.
Maybe the 2012A. Okay.
The 300,000.
No, the 1.2 for. You're saying that in 2026 the 1.24 is retired. Fully.
330,000 of it is
330,000 of the current total principal and interest.
So the original was 1.2.
What
we're
is
paying
the
now.
total current
okay, I
principal
gotcha. I'm
interest is
sorry.
1.24.
So it's the 330 that retires in 2026.
We get
Yes.
reduced.
And that 330 is related to the 8-year notes.
So in my mind, okay, because okay,
Tax
you and I
notes.
are on the same page. So there's another. I think my point of all of this. I think we're missing something in that reduction because there's another set of bonds that retire in
If you
the year after next. Is that right?
If
Okay.
you look at the total principal and interest, that's already been factored in. Those that were structured with, those have already been, that reduction doesn't show up. I know what you're talking about. There's certain bonds that will be retired, but other debt later than that, and I can't remember whether it's the 2019 or the tax notes, fill in the gap in debt service that's created as those bonds retire. It's already factored in.
Okay. Okay.
It's already factored in.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And we are back to Mr. Farrell.
Thank you. Page 42 is the implementation, which I've been asked to address tonight. So the implementation, and there is a list of recommendations that we have both on our commercial properties and on everything else, and that's actually not on pages that I was going to address tonight. It's on 44, 45, and 46, but I'll just address what's on the agenda. For the most part, I always drift. Can't help it. This should go to obviously the planning and zoning, and they should make their recommendations and make their recommendations back to the city council on that. Y'all are the ultimate source of changes that you're gonna make on this comprehensive plan. It's not a fixed document. We all anticipate that the city council will, over a period of time, either change the priorities of goals, change the way you get to goals, or change the goals depending on the time and the money that's required to get to each one. And that's something that we as citizens rely on y'all to do that. And I think that that's something that this is not the book of all books. It is just a guiding document, and y'all are the ultimate helmsman to decide how you get to that point on that. The other thing I'd like to make sure everybody knows is just because we have put a goal or something in here, doesn't mean that it's obtainable, doesn't mean that we can get there, doesn't mean that times don't change and that you do that. As you go through the implementation of this over a period of years, and we realize there is a time period that takes to get all this done, there are some recommendations that we made as you do the amendments to the plan, and I'll point a few of those out. We do believe that you should do a public hearing if you amend the plan. It can be part of what you're going through, but you should have, if you're doing that, once the plan is adopted, I think if it's amended, we felt like it should be a public hearing to make sure that the public has an opportunity to voice their opinion on that. We think the plan should be, and we spent a lot of time on this, little question next, is how often the plan should be reviewed. Just to see whether it's being implemented, whether it's possible, whether it needs to be changed on that. We had some dates that were recommended by a lot of different dates, let me just put it that way. We chose to write regular review, and that, again, we're relying on the city council as you go through this process to decide what that date should be on that, to come up with that. And it does need to be done on that. We would anticipate that the city uses this as the comprehensive plan as a guide for the city of Rollingwood and our community actions that we do. We would use the comprehensive plan as a guide for land use and zoning decisions, capital improvement planning, budget, and other city actions on that. And finally, seek and encourage partnerships to implement strategies and plan objectives. Partners might include other cities, may include the state, federal, local businesses, the development communities, and our citizens. And I might add, this may include, when I talk about our citizens, I felt this was all-inclusive to mean our adjacent neighborhoods that we have around Rollingwood, that we have, because we've been always considerate of what's happening with our adjacent neighborhoods on that. And finally, we've listed, and that's beyond my agenda item tonight, but we do have a list of recommendations. I think we're going to get to that at a later time. I'll do that. I would like to make one comment. It's probably I'll try to put it in the partnership section. If I get out of line, just let me know. I do think in our mobility section that we had, that we're not going over tonight, we'll be going over future, but I think there's a time element on that I'd like to address. We do have an issue about our citizens want to make sure that our traffic is controlled properly within our residence area, but it also, we're looking at how we deal with South Mopac and BK's Road. And I always hate to do this, but I'll hold my nose and do it. I think it's time for us to have a traffic analysis done to update the 2002 traffic analysis we did for our residential area. But I think that needs to be we need to be inclusive to look at the positive aspects of any redevelopment of the roadway on BK's Road, as well as the negative aspects if the state chooses not to do that timely. And the same thing on South Mopac. The benefits to our city and the negatives to our city if it's done in an appropriate manner on that. And I think that would be useful not only to our residents, I think it'd be useful to the city in going in and handing a report to both TxDOT and TCRMA to say, this is our analysis of what we're doing on that. It's just a matter of money, right, Devin? And
Tom, any idea how much a study like that would cost?
You know, I'm always low. That's all I can tell you. I wouldn't anticipate that this needs to be. We did a traffic study. I know we've done. I think we've done 3 in my life in Rollingwood that I remember. I think there was one done prior to my time. I did one, and I know Bill Hamilton had to do one when we got the warrants for the park speed limits. So I suspect there's 3 of them somewhere on that. The old one that would be before 2000, I'm not sure what that was done. I vaguely remember it, and I can't tell you what it said. I know our study that we did was primarily interested in how to address cut-through traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, and at this time, our residents said, we don't like stop signs, we don't like speed bumps, we just want everybody to drive the proper speed and no cut-through traffic. Okay, that's where we are. But I think this
Yeah.
would be extremely useful if we can figure out. Roxanne, I'm gonna say 10 to 20. I'm really just not very good at that, and especially in today's environment we're dealing with. You don't have to do, the Rollingwood portion, residential portion of that, we actually have data that we can use, and I think the police are patrolling, and that's the biggest detriment to speeding that we have in Rollingwood on that. And I have reminded people forever, you can't get to Rollingwood without cutting through another city. So, yeah, we don't like cut through traffic, but that's us. Now, the impact that could have on bee caves and MOPAC, our discussions with those entities that are gonna make those decisions could be, I think they could be an effective use of our funds on that. Now, I know our attorney has used a traffic engineer already. I haven't seen their data, but
Tom and I talked about this briefly. The Bickerstaff firm has used a traffic
Yes.
engineer in conjunction with the South MOPAC reviews.
yeah.
Yes. In fact, the last letter we sent to CTRMA, some of that
Yes.
was some of that information they used him to assist with. So.
And I was thinking on this as being a little broader than just a normal traffic study, because I would think that normal traffic studies don't say, here's a negative if you don't do it on that. And I think on B Case Road, and I'll remind everybody, we almost lost an officer on B Case Road. We've had several cars in my history. Many cars, I don't know, I can't remember how many, but several have washed off, went around our barricades, and washed off. No loss of life that I recall, but yes, we've had that. And the same thing on the implementation of South MOPAC. And I don't know if TxDOT's tying these two
Yeah.
projects.
There's also an issue that we'll talk about later tonight that Alec and I are tracking related to the Zilker Vision program,
Yes.
and some ideas that have been floated, at least regarding Stratford Lane, which is could potentially affect us. So getting a feel for the traffic flow on that portion of that side of Rollingwood is also probably useful.
It's just money. And that's why you guys get paid the big bucks to find those dollars. I would emphasize this in regard to that. We have some natural partners that would work with Rollingwood on many of these projects, Zilker, BKs, and South MOPAC. And that is the other neighborhoods that are in the city of Austin and Westlake that are going to be impacted by this. And I think it's important that we reach out to them to get them involved in this. That would add a lot of strength to, I think, our position on that. So if there's any questions, I'm sorry I probably took up more time than I should have.
No, it's been great.
We've got some other items on the agenda. If there's any questions, please feel free to, I'll try to answer them now. Otherwise, we'll deal with the rest of this as it comes up.
Thank you, Tom. I know I speak for everyone when I thank you personally for taking your time to guide and lead the strike force. And thanks to everyone on the strike force, Councilwoman Brown, but also all of the other community members who gave of their time and resources. And I think we've got a great product. I'm excited about it. Look forward to digging into it in more detail in some future meetings. And then we'll turn it over to council to take some action. But I think it was a needed process, and I think we should all be proud of the work that was done. So.
Thank y'all all for
With that, we will move on to item number 4, And that is a presentation and discussion with Kay Freeze and Associates, city engineers regarding the 2020 Drainage Infrastructure Improvement Plan, affectionately known as the IIP. So, and we have about 40 minutes. I'd like to take a 5-minute break before we go into council. So if we could do maybe 10, 15 minutes, try to kind of keep it quick here, because we do need to do this. We need to talk a little bit about the CIP, and then I want to save some time to talk about facilities or needs assessment. So with that, turn it back over to Avi.
Thank you, Mayor. I had prepared a 2-hour presentation, but we'll skim through it. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Task Force Committee members. I am A.B. Salinas, and this is Lauren Winnick-Morin. We are with Kay Freeze and Associates, and we're here to present on the Infrastructure Improvement Plan, which was completed, I think, back in June of 2020. And so we'll go through a little bit of the background, the story of what we came up with, and kind of where we go from here. And
Abby, you're probably going to do this. Again, this is a work session. Some of this we've talked about, but be sure and talk about a little bit about process too, how you, for the new council members, want them to have a sense of how you developed the plan too. I'm sure you're going to do that, but let's make sure and cover some of that as well.
Okay, I'll try to make sure I cover that, and if there's any gaps in there, please let me know,
Sure.
and I'll try to do our best to address that. And
Left and right arrow.
okay,
Yes, it is instead of the up and down.
Oh,
all right.
yeah.
And we got some funky
Fancy.
formatting there. And it's too bad that Mr. Farrell left. I did want to say that I think I wouldn't mind if property values went down. Okay. So I'll start with providing a little bit of a background on what the Infrastructure Improvement Plan is about. A lot of times you'll hear it referred to as the IIP. So if you ever hear that, that's what we're talking about. And the intention of this plan was to identify and plan for mitigation, specifically focused on stormwater and localized flood control issues throughout the city. So that's what you'll find this document really focuses on. And the other important thing to remember is that this document is a planning tool. So it helps identify where the problems are in the city, and it helps give us an idea of what the solution might be and an order of magnitude cost of what that might entail. But it's important to remember that we didn't get into the details of any single project. So because we say that the solution might be a 36-inch culvert, it doesn't mean that that's what it ultimately will be, but it helps us understand what kind of the next steps are in the screening process as we work towards project development. So again, this is a tool to help strategize for implementation. So a little bit more on the background. The IIP consisted of data collection and development of a hydraulic model. And that's kind of what's illustrated here, and I'll cover that in just a second. But what it does, this hydraulic model helped us identify where some of the hotspot issues were. And then in addition to that, through this process, we had public meetings and a public survey. So we engaged the community, also got feedback that way to help calibrate our process. And the plan ultimately arrived at 23 areas of interest. And for these areas of interest, we developed conceptual solutions. We developed these planning level cost estimates, and again, try to establish an order of magnitude need to address these concerns. So what I will share here that's shown on this exhibit is you're looking at different colors. The different colors represent flood depths, and this is what is the 100-year probability storm event. So it's a hypothetical storm, but it's supposed to represent relative risk for this 1% chance. What you would expect, and this is kind of like a little, I don't know, we'll call it Stormwater 101, and I know that everybody knows this intuitively. Water rolls downhill. And so as you see, probably the most significant waterway in the city is Eanes Creek or Dry Creek, and it crosses a number of roadways, and each of those roadways were Bee Caves Road, Edge Grove. As you might expect, those are problem areas that need to be addressed. And then the other thing you can see is as it goes downhill, the depths, the flow increase. Another kind of important thing to think about and remember is, when the city was developed, the attention to drainage isn't the attention that drainage is given now. And so when the city was platted and it was developed, you'll see that you have kind of some areas that are darker, meaning the creeks, and then you kind of have like these little fingers that come out, and a lot of those fingers are areas that are now creeks that go through people's private properties. There's not easements that were platted at that time when it was developed, and then there's areas where there was once creeks and it was filled in. Now there's a house and the roadway becomes the main form of conveyance. So fast forward to today, we've got a fully developed city, and we have now changes in land use with respect to properties increasing their impervious cover, and so the problems that started out are now becoming increasingly worse, and so there's been different measures to try to mitigate that risk, but that's certainly top of mind. So we talked about 23 problem areas or areas of interest that were identified. That's what this exhibit here represents. It's color coded, and it's kind of alphabetized. So each of the colors, red, blue, green, orange, yellow, represent different subbasins or watersheds within the city. So if we're looking at the area in green, all of that would drain towards Eanes Creek. And then in the triangles, those are the areas that are problem areas. And so as we talked about, what you see here is illustratively, you look at Eanes Creek and you can see that there's issues or problem areas identified along each of the roadway crossings, each of the kind of the creeks that are there, and then areas where I think where there was once a creek and then became kind of filled in and developed as the city historically was developed. And that's kind of, you look at the Nixon Pleasant area, that's an area where I think there was really a natural waterway there at one point. As we worked through this process, we came up with a criteria for prioritizing projects to come up with these 23 areas of interest. What we looked at was depth of flooding, so 6 inches or greater of depth that were impacting structures or within that immediate proximity. And then we looked at velocity. So if the flow was 6 feet per second or higher, we also recognize that as a public safety concern, as well as an erosive condition potentially. And so that was another criteria that flagged areas for interest. So just to kind of sum it up, we have 23 areas. We looked at the number of structures, properties impacted. We looked at public safety, some interdependencies of projects. So typically with drainage, you've got to tackle the project or the problem downstream to upstream, because if we create relief or open up a pipe at the top end, but the straw is still the same size, the funnel doesn't quite make its way down. So that's another consideration as we work through project development. If you look at the IIP and you go through the document, we have project worksheets in there for each of these 23 projects. It summarizes the problem, conceptual solution, the ranking, and some different costs that are in there. And so those are, again, order of magnitude costs and a conceptual solution. If there's a project that we were deciding to move forward with, then we would recommend going through a project screening process of, let's look at these costs. For one, this was 2 years ago. We know that, a lot of things have changed since then. updating those figures as well as kind of reevaluating the solution and seeing what might be the best bang for buck solution. Okay. So all that gets wrapped up into basically this table here, and this is a project ranking that represents each of those 23 projects. It has the costs associated with them and then the ranking. So Bee Caves Road, Edge Grove, those are some of the highest ranking projects. Dixon Pleasant, which is a project that we have ongoing right now. Bee Caves Road is shown as unknown, and I think largely because of the interaction that we have with TxDOT on that, and I think there still needs to be a lot of discussion on kind of how to approach that before we put a figure to it. I guess the important thing to note there, the total is somewhere about $18 million, so it represents a significant need, and I think kind of the nature of things tend to not get much cheaper as time goes on. So where are we to date? What have we been doing from the city and from K-Freeze's perspective? We've moved forward on 2 projects. So that's the project around Nixon Pleasant. That's there in that green circle. M, K are kind of those areas. And that's associated with some, again, I think an area where there was once a creek. It's draining now in the roadway. There's some flooding issues, velocity issues. It goes into a creek. And so we're working towards doing some channel improvements and some storm drain improvements to alleviate flood risk there. The other area of interest that or the other project that we're working on is Project R. That's around Hatley, Almerian Way, and continues a little bit further upstream. Those are each at about 90% design, and I think we can expect those to likely go to construction later this year. The other things that have been happening and kind of were part of the recommendations of the report was as we went through this process, we determined that there wasn't a lot of information on easements and right-of-way, and also some inventory of just assets that the city has with respect to public infrastructure. That started, I think, about a year or so ago, and I think a lot of headway has been made in that way of it cataloging that. That's been good. Some other recommendations that came out of the plan was a recommendation for a sidewalk master plan, a utility master plan, and some traffic calming study that could relate into the traffic study that was just mentioned earlier. Some of the other recommendations that are in there are with respect to updates to the criteria, drainage criteria, ordinances, and so there's things that we can do from a capital perspective of infrastructure, and there's other things that we can do from a perspective of policy to help mitigate additional problems from recurring in the future. Let's see, what else? With respect to utility master plan, we've also been making progress in that, and you'll get a presentation at council later this evening regarding some of the water modeling and infrastructure work we've been doing there, and kind of the CIP, I guess, project development.
So hold that thought. I'll pull up item number 5, update from Mayor and K-Freeze and Associates regarding a water capital improvement plan. So that's now laid out. So finish your statement.
We're going to provide an update later. Greg Blackburn from our office will do that, and I'll save the fireworks for him. And but if there's any questions that you have right now, I can kind of try my best to answer those, and if not, I'll relay those questions over to him so he's prepared.
Yeah, and I'll just add regarding item number 5, thank you for bringing that up. The CIP is the capital improvement plan. And when we say capital improvement plan, we're really talking about water improvement plan, our water system, the water lines. I did notice even in the CIP, you'll notice tonight that I think even K-Freeze begins to reference it as the water system capital improvement plan at some point. So for all of those listening at home, and I think we'll post this online too, we're going to have a deeper dive and come back to the CIP as well. We wanted to lay it out tonight because it was appropriate in the context of all the infrastructure issues that we're talking about at this work session. Want council to be able to take a crack at that
which we will do tonight, to have a discussion about it. And then once the council is comfortable with the final work product, we'll come back to have a deeper discussion in one of these work sessions so that we'll know how to move forward on these water line type issues in the future. So, I did hear a compliment today on Cape Freeze. I'll just pass this on to the council. When talking to Crossroads, I think they were speaking very well of Cape Freeze and your ability to help begin to manage some of these issues that I think everyone agrees maybe in the past there's been a lot of deferred maintenance, and we haven't always kept up with a lot of these IIP issues, CIP issues, and we appreciate K-Freeze's effort to try to get us on top of some of those issues. I'm looking forward to that. I know Ashley's looking forward to that. You know, as council knows, we're a little bit in triage mode in relation to our staffing issues, but we're making progress there. Hopefully have some good news for you on that very soon. Once we get our feet under us on that issue, I think we're going to sit down, look forward to sitting down and coming up with a master plan, a master administrative plan on how to stay on top of some of these issues like the CIP and the IIP, the infrastructure issues, the facility issues, and really try to do a better job of really mapping these issues out from an administrative, from an viewpoint, so that we're not getting behind, we're not deferring maintenance, that we're bringing things to council in a much more deliberative way earlier, so that we don't have some of the buildup and deferred maintenance that I think we're having to deal with now. So, and that all sort of plays into the comprehensive plan. You have the comprehensive plan that guides that process, but what I'm talking about is really the execution and the administrative portion of making sure that we're following through on that plan in a methodical way. So, thank you, A.B. Any questions for K-Freeze on either the IIP, the process, the everything that was laid out, or any sort of big picture issues or questions about the CIP? Speak now.
All right. Well, I appreciate the positive feedback, and thank you. We'll relay that to the team. And the one last thing I'll just say is, again, this is a planning tool for as you guys work through implementation of identifying projects. We're going to talk about later the water CIP. One of the next steps, I think, is taking a look at these needs, take a look at your water needs, your roadway needs, and kind of look for overlaps and find where you get the best bang for your buck for your investment. But
I'm glad to hear you say that. Was
Yes.
When I was on council, that was always a real, not a problem, but a missed opportunity in my mind. A lot of times when you don't overlap those various plans, you may dig a hole one week for a water line and miss the opportunity to do an infrastructure, a drainage improvement while you're at it. So I think that's important to me as mayor. I suspect that it's important to the council, and so help us remember to really overlay those plans so that we're being efficient at all times, as efficient as possible.
And I think we're getting there with a lot of the planning work that we've been doing up front is having those answers. So anyways, thank you for all's time, and appreciate having the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Great, thank you. With that, we will move on to item number 6, presentation and discussion by city staff regarding the 2019 Spatial Needs Assessment and discussion with Fire Chief David Wilson, Travis County ESD number 9, regarding proposal for a satellite emergency station to be co-located at City Hall. And Ms. Wayman, will you lead us off with this one?
Sure. If it's okay with the city council, I'd like to have Chief Wilson start out. I want to make sure he gets a chance to give his quick presentation. And my apologies for not putting it in the packet, but you do have it there in front of you, and I can include it later for the public. But just want to kind of get an overview from him about kind of their needs and their hopes for spatial growth in the future, and then how we can be supportive.
Chief Wilson, I'll recognize you. Thank you for coming back again with us. I know this is a little bit of a repeat performance for you, but thank you. We do have some new council members who maybe did not hear your last presentation. I think I know I am excited about this opportunity. Hopefully they will be as well, but I think this is a good opportunity for us to hear again from you, kind of what you're thinking. Thanks for bringing a little bit more definitive information for us. I know I'll have a few questions, and with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor, Council. Appreciate you all having me back again this evening to kind of give a high level. I wanted to make sure to give a high level overview of Travis County Emergency Service District Number 9, but really why we're here this evening and kind of the past months and talking with Chief Brady and the city manager. Really, Travis County ESD 9, as a reminder, covers City of Rollingwood, so Westlake Hills and Western Travis County, kind of all the way out toward the Cuernavaca area. And then we also cover Lake Austin frontage from Davenport Ranch back around to the city of Westlake Hills and over to Rollingwood down to Mopac. So wide service area, but really in 2019 we wanted to do some additional strategic planning for our district and make sure we were providing the best service we can to the community. And so one of those things we looked at was our response, were we meeting our goals, and where are some of those areas that we may be falling short or need some improvement. And so that's really what I've provided you this evening. In this report here, it includes several other items, but I just pulled out the Rollingwood section for you all tonight. But really, we had 3 recommendations within the report. One of those was internal. The other 2 were the addition of a unit in the city of Rollingwood, and then a unit out west of Capitol Texas Highway. So just to review those, we really started when the report came out and we reviewed it in 2020 was really after the February winter storm, when we had a staffing unit here. We staffed our squad here with city personnel. We were able to more effectively respond to that incident by having a vehicle here. And so that not only did the report highlight some areas where we could use some improvement for our medical response, but also highlighted some areas during the winter storm of travel that we're able to get to emergencies quicker here in the city. But really, that's the high level overview of what the department provides. We're governed by 5 board of commissioners who are appointed by the county commissioners. And so I will say that one of those is a city of Rollingwood resident, and then 3 of those are in Westlake Hills, but they also live Ridgewood, so they're kind of close to Rollingwood and Los Lomas. So those are also right in the general area. The board has expressed an interest in exploring opportunities as the city evaluates possible infrastructure needs regarding City Hall, and how the board and the council may be able to work together in the future to provide a resource that's both cost effective for hopefully the citizens of Rollingwood, but the citizens of the whole fire district as well by adding an additional unit in the city. And with that, I'll take questions. I do have some spatial needs and kind of some of the things we would need, but did want to give you an overview of what the fire department provides and how the ESD is set up.
Council, any questions? I'd just like to, for any residents listening out there, be careful, everyone, on Tuesdays around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. It looks like that's when you need to be the most careful.
That's right. Tuesday. Some of the other areas are Wednesdays at 10 a.m. So it kind of
10 a.m. is a big time for accidents.
You will see in a lot of the fire district in ESC 9, but really in the city of Rollingwood as well, where our call volume is very much on a bell curve, and so as the call volume in the evening is less, and we peak up during the day when rush hour, when there's more citizens in the community and offices, that kind of stuff. So it picks up there as well.
A few things. I'll kick us off. And thank you again, Chief, for being here. So talk to us again about the type of unit that you would co-locate here specifically. I mean, it wouldn't be a
full-size fire engine,
right?
So that's correct. And really, what we would want to start off with is what we consider a squad. So it's a smaller vehicle. It's like on a pickup truck chassis, so it looks like an F-350, F-550. But it does carry 400 gallons of water, so it has fire suppression capabilities. It has carbon monoxide capabilities to use our tools to do that. We can run. Mainly, it's for medical response, first response to arrive quickly, which that's one of the main needs. We do have automatic aid with all of the fire departments in Travis County, so the dispatchers can see the closest fire station and send them. As mentioned in the report, Austin Fire Department Engine 32 is off of Montebello, right across from the finish line, so you may see their apparatus in the city some, and then our fire station at Westlake and Redbud also responds from Stratford pretty quickly. And so we would really be looking at a smaller vehicle to start with hopefully being able to build it though, or we can expand, if the need is there for the, for the city or the fire district to expand, make sure we're planning for the future 10 years out, 15 years out, that if a fire engine's ever needed in the city, we can do a full-size apparatus with additional personnel too.
So it is literally the first response of first responses.
It is. it would be, 2 personnel is kind of what our strategic plan shows first. So they're, 2 personnel are able to, with the ambulance coming as well, able to do first response medical care. We have advanced EMT, so if we're waiting a long time, like we might be in the winter storm, or if the city's very busy sending an ambulance, they can start IVs. We have the AEDs on the truck, those kind of things
You
too.
saved my mother's life in a
Yeah.
terrible wreck
Wow.
that was at the shopping center at 360 and Bee Caves Road. My mother and I and her friend were going to dinner at what used to be called Canyon Cafe. It's
Mhm.
where the burger shop is now, on Halloween Eve. And a car of 16-year-olds was coming the opposite direction where that hill is, where the stop sign is now, out to egg their friend in the car ahead of them. And so they pulled into our lane. We were on the dark side of the hill and hit our car head on. And y'all were there in about 2 minutes. My mother had massive internal injuries and saved her life, frankly.
That's great.
That's an endorsement.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
But that's the style vehicle we'd be looking at, the personnel we'd be looking at to start with for those to be able to operate in the
And
city.
council, I think, where I come from, I think this is hugely important in our discussion about facilities, because in my mind, we've got a great police department, a great police force for all of our law enforcement needs, but I think this really rounds out the type of first response that our community deserves and needs. And I think to have a discussion around this issue and the opportunity that is here, kind of literally knocking on our door, I think lends itself to a broader discussion about what we need to do with facilities here and what opportunity is there. Because we have no, and I'm going to get, my question to you is, so I see, it's a good segue, needed within 1 year. I don't know. We're a little further away, probably, realistically, from being able to make, push dirt and make the strides we need to make if the community is a mind to do something different with our facility. When you say you need this within a year, we don't have a place to put you today. Now, we could be creative and think of something, but.
And we realize, and that's, a lot of the times with the consultants find an immediate need, and realize, and so we've been researching that, but we also realize the area, what land is available for looking at a fire station, and that's not, there's just not much that's when it's a built out community. Right. And so when we hope for a year, we're adding additional staff that will still be able to respond from our current fire station, so that adds more depth to the fire department. And so that year has helped us bring on additional staffing and provide some additional depth. But we realize that could be a 3-year timeline. You know, that could be a 2-year timeline, and we would still be interested in evaluating those partnerships.
Okay, that's great. I mean, that's helpful to me because I guess my message, and hopefully it'll be council's at some point, is like, don't give up on us. Like, we're interested. Brooke?
And you say there were 75 priority 4 medical incidents in
In 2019.
2019? That's more than, that's like 1.5 a week,
Yeah.
which is a surprising number to me. And what is a priority 4 medical
So
incident?
priority 4, so a priority 1 medical incident would be, we could use a cardiac arrest as an
Okay.
example. A priority 4 medicals could be a fall. So somebody's fallen, needs assistance, a broken arm, you know, somebody complaining of just general pain, sickness, those kind of things are priority 4s.
Okay.
Those. That call volume in 2019, so in 2020, I pulled that since we just had it, we had 180 incidents, so it continues to increase. We did have the winter storm added a little bit of incident response to that number, but we had 180 incidents within the city that we responded to in 2021
or 2020?
2021.
And, you know, and you mentioned also, you know, trying to keep an eye on future growth, and something that Chief Brady and I had discussed is, you know, there is potential here for some shared, the types of facilities that I think you would potentially be interested in are also things that we could do some shared spaces with our PD. And that could be as creative as some, you know, some area, an area to stay active and work out and that sort of thing, but also some shared meeting space or break space, that sort of thing. I think would all be things that would.
Locker room,
Yes,
Mhm.
that sort of thing.
Bathroom.
Yes, bathroom, shared showers, those sorts of things.
Right.
bunk area,
Yes.
all that stuff, yeah.
Which is a good segue back to, well, any other questions for Chief? Either Chief?
Thanks
you.
again for having us, and I will tell you, you know, again, the Board of Commissioners are interested, so we'll keep the conversation moving forward with them, and you know, with you all and Chief Brady as well.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. And that's sort of a good segue back to the spatial needs assessment, which I think is in your packets tonight. And we don't have time to go over all of it, but just to give council a brief overview. So Brinkley Sargent is the firm that council hired back in 2019 to conduct this. They spent a lot of time with staff in all different departments. They spent a great deal of time with PD, really digging deep into what were the wants and what were the needs of each different department. And what they came back to council with was a very comprehensive look at all of the different options and desires to move forward with. Don't confuse this with drawings. You know, I felt like the council, and I was on the council at the time, from time to time I think we got a little bit bogged down in the details of, well, we would want it to look like this, or we would want it to look like that. That really wasn't the point of this. The point of this was to get a sense of what the overall requests were of the various departments, and then to literally put some square footage with each one of those requests. There are items in this report that I think that I would classify as a want, not a need. I think there are a number of those actually, but there are also a number of needed items here. So take a look at it, spend some time with it, because I think it does. It is well done and gives you some ideas of the types of concepts and options that were put in front of council at the time. And they did range from a total tear down of this building and rebuild it from the ground up to just a renovation of what's here currently, and then sort of a hybrid of those two, which would be a renovation with some type of addition that goes onto it somewhere. So, any questions on any of that? that, I would like us to take about a 5-minute break, and then we will come back and start the council meeting. Anything else, Ashley? And we will stand adjourned. Hey.